right. Hey, good evening. You got Kyle from Cirrus to Steer Coast, and you got Strobes here, illustrious former fighter pilot and HBS graduate. Why don't you say hi?
How's it going, guys?
uh, so, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the GMAT, and we're also going to talk about the GRE and briefly the executive assessment. Um, so, the GMAT, as everybody knows, anything I've done on sit reps is nominally geared towards going to get an MBA. And so to get into an MBA program, at least get into ones that are kind of worthy of you going, you have to take the GMAT or you have to take a standardized test, right? And I want to talk about maybe kind of dispel some myths here and talk about maybe just the blocking and tackling of getting over this really, in my opinion, the only hurdle to getting into a good MBA program, um, because everything else is kind of fungible. But we'll just jump into it. So, Strobes, your first thought on the GMAT.
I always look at it as a hurdle, and a lot of people placed a ton of emphasis on it. I got X score. Do I need to take it again? And I always felt like, and I had gotten the advice that if you can clear the 700 hurdle, you're fine. Don't try to get a 710 to a 740 or 780. Just clear the hurdle, and that's it. And I think for most of us who are coming out of the military, you're 5 years out of college and probably at least 7 years away from doing some like basic elementary algebra. And that's kind of what the GMAT's testing. And so the people who are on the admissions committee know that vets by and large have been out of the academic environment for a while. I mean, for me, it was over a decade. And for a lot of aviators, it's going to be pushing that decade mark. And so really the GMAT, from my point of view, and talking with all the other vets at HBS, was more of a screener. Like, can this person handle the academics?
Yeah, it's the way I think I put it to people is, people will come to me and they'll be like, "Oh, what about my GPA?" I'm like worried. I like graduated West Point. I have like a 2.7, and like my response to them is, "Look, if you can crush on the GMAT, it's going to like put to rest like any of the committee's fears about you, like A, not being able to survive the program or the first semester really, and B, um, not being able to recruit well or really perform well at the corporate level." And I say that with like a kind of a caveat that the GMAT isn't really an indicator of anything other than your ability to take it.
Yeah.
But I will say I don't meet a lot of stupid people in business school. So
Yeah, I'll agree with that one.
I don't know. That's kind of what to say about it. So, you have the GMAT, you have the GRE, and you have the executive assessment. And the GMAT and the GRE, they're taken everywhere pretty much now. It used to be there's only the GMAT, and it used to be, then the GRE started to gain acceptance. And the reason it did is because business schools are a business and they want to have the widest pool possible of applicants to choose from. And they figured that the GRE, if they could find a way to kind of, compare the two, it would make it so it would be easier to keep up enrollments and everything, or to expand it, or just to expand the pool of people they can reach, right? Because you're saying you can just take a test, we don't care, and so it doesn't really matter what test you take. You'll hear people say, "Oh, business schools will see that if you took the GMAT, you're serious about going to business school." It's all a bunch of bullshit, and the reason it's a bunch of bullshit is because there's no incentive, like a like a business school is only going to look at your fucking score, right? Like I went and took a fantastic GMAT course, and I'll plug this guy for free because they do a great job. Is the Austin GMAT review, and he told us, at least when I took it, right, which is several years ago now, he was like, "Look, you don't even need to do like the integrated reasoning." He's like, the extra sections you don't give a fuck about, and he was like, the schools only care about your quantitative and your verbal, right? Your quantitative and your verbal, and the total score, because it's the only thing they're really graded on by the different admissions or rankings that are out there, which business schools are very sensitive to, and also businesses that recruit from these schools and who use the GMAT as a kind of is a filter. Also, don't give a fuck about the extra stuff either. So it's like quantitative, verbal, combined score. And that's something to keep in mind, I think, because there's just like a lot of like weird mythology around this test. So I think when you talk about it, but there's something important. This is the most important part of your application. Would you agree, Strobes?
Yeah, I'd say in the sense that if you mess it up, it's a no-go. Like this is a great way to prevent yourself from getting into a business school, but the GMAT is not going to single-handedly get you in.
Yeah, and so people will say, hey, like, so business schools try to be fairly transparent, right, about who they're looking for when it comes to potential applicants. And at the good business schools, so like the top 25, really, and I hate to say top 25, all business schools screen people, right? And what they all like to say is we're looking for a specific kind of person, and the kind of like first like cut that they can make is the GMAT, because it's a way to compare people at a point and place all equally, right? It's at some level, and say, hey, this person has got a higher score. And the GMAC who does the GMAC will say all this bullshit about, oh, there's correlation with like success or whatever, but it's all bullshit. Anyway, so if you want to see like, hey, like what is a GMAT score that I would need to get into a program? Well, it's actually pretty easy. So what I've gone here is I typed in class profile for heart. It's class profile, HBS MBA, right? Instantly, boom, it's going to take me to this class profile MBA, and we'll jump in. And okay, and so like Harvard is like trying to tell you like, hey, this is who we normally accept, right? Like when we talk about the class profile, like this is the class profile, like these are the stats, and they've got this pretty mosaic of we're super diverse, and everybody's like so creative and happy to be here. And look, we got the Tilken father. This person looks like they're married. I don't know what this fucking guy's doing.
Section mate of mine.
Yeah. And so they say like, look, truly diverse body, yada yada yada. We follow the graduate. I don't know what GME is, but it's probably something graduate management education. And so they'll tell you like, hey, like here's the average score, or no, wait, 732 MBA class 20. See, I would already failed the GMAT. I couldn't read here. They'll give you here's all the stats on everybody. It's like pre-MBA industry, right? But hey, look, 5% military, 4.7 average years work experience. I'm just gonna start telling people to come to these fucking pages when they ask me to get into business school.
Yeah.
And
here's all your answers.
Yeah, here's all your answers. But in caveat for vets, this stuff can be a little adjusted, right? But okay, here we go. GMAT. Here's they save the best for last, right? Because they want to get to which is funny, right? Because this is actually the hard tax of what really matters. And it's okay. So the GMAT percent of class. So they got 78% of the class scored in between this range. So like 27 to 51, right? 40 to 51. This 27 in this, I mean, is pretty low. The 40 is more respectable.
It's pretty interesting. No one got a perfect score.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's possible, right? And we'll talk about why that is the scoring methodology here in a second. And they'll say 620 to 790. So when you see this, right, 620 is like a pretty low score for the GMAT. Like Strobe said, 700 is kind of the like all the schools you're competing for, like the pool of 700 like GMATs. So if you get that, you're like exponentially like going to be better. You can still get in with a sub 700. It's just tougher. And so when you see this, don't think this is like a normal distribution here.
Yeah.
Like there's probably like
there's a strong bias to the right end of that.
Yeah, and like the tails for this thing, right? Yeah, they're going to be more skewed to the right on the higher end, right? So you're probably going to see like, hey, around like 730s to I don't know, 60s, 80s probably. Um, if you looked at a distribution, and on the left hand side you'll start to see you'll see like this low scores. And so like, who gets into like an MBA program, HBS MBA program with a 620? I know the answer, but I want to let Strobes talk. So why don't you say something?
I mean, I think if you have a 620, or if you have something below the 700s, you better have something else. Those people have something else in their resume that's pretty outstanding, like this, Medal of Honor winner, or you founded a company when you were 16 and sold it when you were 20.
Yeah,
Like,
NFL player is one that you might reasonably expect, right? Like
yeah,
if you were like a real, like if you were like you made millions of dollars as an NFL player, right?
yeah,
Like that, like
you have to
they
be an
reward
outlier.
excellence essentially.
Yeah, if you're an outlier, you can have outlier scores.
Yeah, yeah. But to be clear, most military folks are not that.
Or if you're from a really rich family,
That is also true. There that
that's the other one.
and
Your last
people
name's on a building.
yeah, and but like, I mean, like for HBS, right? That's really tough, right? Because HBS, there's all sorts of billionaires that come from HBS, right? So they aren't as impressed by it. Other
Yeah,
schools are more impressed by it.
yeah,
There are definitely schools that are impressed by last names, but I mean, it's still like, but like, to be clear, right? If you go to HBS, one of my really good friends did, obviously Austin, you did as well. But his, like, I was like, this is when I was first learning about MBA programs, and I was talking with his girlfriend, who's now making a successful exit from the company she founded. She's now his wife, or she's now his wife. And she was telling me like, oh yeah, like the fucking like, daughter of the Goldman Sachs CEO is here, right? So like, it does matter, right? But like,
yeah,
once again, those are kind of like outliers. The most of the people they admit are fairly decent people, though they all kind of like have a demographic, if you will.
yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so important to note that like, if you were to see this would be skewed to the right heavily. So kind of approach it with that mindset. And then we have the GRE, right? The same sort of deals. These, above 160s is kind of where you need to be, I think, for both the verbal and the quant. Yeah, see, like median verbal, median quantitative. This is actually lower than I thought it would be. I thought it would have been a couple points higher. Um, and then let's go look at, and so Harvard is obviously the #1 program in the world. You'll see like all sorts of bullshit with like rankings and everything, and like maybe like Stanford will be on top. That it's stupid. Harvard's the best school in the world. Like I hate to break. I mean, Stanford is like also a truly amazing school, but like, don't add me. Do you feel that way, Austin?
Uh, I'm not going to really answer that as a graduate, but it was part of my decision criteria on deciding where to go, which is like Stanford's got an amazing program,
Yeah.
but the name recognition just doesn't go as far as Harvard's name recognition. Like everyone on the planet knows what Harvard means. Not
Mm-hmm.
everyone knows what Stanford means. And that's not a ding on Stanford. It's
Oh,
just
for
for
sure not.
me, like, you know, everyone's got their own decision and their own like criteria for picking a school. But yeah, it's really hard to beat that name recognition. And I mean, they invented the MBA, so
Yeah, they really did. They are the West Point of management.
that's true.
If a poorly such analogy could be made.
I mean, West
Um,
Point's the Naval Academy of the North.
yeah, essentially. I heard somebody refer to it as the Leavenworth North, which I kind of get a chuckle at. It's beautiful during the summer. It's
Oh
also
man,
good. It's beautiful during the fall too. Actually, it's beautiful all the time. It's more tolerable in the summer.
I think it's the most impressive campus. Uh, but man, in the winter, it's not beautiful. It's just depressing.
And I remember being down by the river docks, right? And I think I was going for a run, or maybe I was taking like a fucking PT test. I mean, that's where they did it. And there's like icebergs like floating down the Hudson, and I'm
Yeah,
just like, this is insane. But that's crazy. I mean, talk about all four seasons.
yeah.
Okay, and nobody wants to hear about our dumb academy stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at Tepper, right, which is my illustrious MBA program. So Tepper ranked nominally about 15. depends. Very good school. I was very impressed by it. It certainly got me the career outcomes I wanted. Let's take a look at it. They've got a similar, bright and hopeful looking MBA class profile page here. And so they kind of, hey, here's like the breakdown of students, large international set. That makes sense. I wonder if Harvard is the same. Yeah, I mean, seems about right. Countries, residency. Yeah, so you can even see where people come from, right? Which is pretty cool.
Wow.
So GPA, right?
Yeah.
So like middle 80%, right? But like once again, GPA is something that can be counteracted. You can counteract a low GPA. All right, here we go. So the average GMAT 680. It's actually gone down. I think it used to be like 700. And our middle 80%, right? So where you're gonna like find the most clustering is gonna be between 626 to 730. So nowhere near as astronomically high as HBS, but still not shabby. Not shabby. More years work experience too.
I think one of the other things to remember is if you look at, when you look at the class, every single MBA program is attempting to do the same thing, which is to construct a class that is very diverse, like purposefully. Like they're not going to put a ton of vets in there. They're going to have their, like Harvard always stays around 5%. And so when you scroll up and you look at, the undergraduate majors and the US residency and, gender and age and international, like they're going to be keeping people within those areas. And so you're kind of competing on the GMAT against people with similar backgrounds and similar demographics to you. So it's not just a straight one-on-one. You're competing with, like, they're not going to take a female investment banker and compare her resume with a male artillery officer. Like, you just can't compare those.
The ones you do meet will probably be more impressive than you, I guarantee.
Yeah.
They're very impressive. Talk about some driven, smart people.
Yeah. And so from that sense, like, again, it's another reason that, don't put too much focus on the GMAT itself, because it is one of many variables that's being taken into account when they're building this class.
Yeah, there's no, you need to aim for like a 700, and then it's kind of in like Jesus's hands at that point.
Yeah, you check the block. It's time to go.
Let me see. It says, so this one says 7% government. That probably means military. Maybe you could derate it by 2%, and then you hit the 5, whatever HBS is, right? So similar. Though I wonder for HBS, I wonder if they have more people from finance. Let me see, consulting. So 15 and 11%. Damn, look at that, right? So they're kind of looking for the same people, right? And the schools are competing on their brand at this point. So what does the GMAT look like, right? So first off, you end up like registering at the GMAT, right? And you got to pay like some painful amount of money to take this test. I think it's like $300 or something.
Yeah.
And they offer some waivers, and I think the military will pay for like one of these tests.
You can also take it on base.
Yeah, you can.
Mine on base.
And I don't know if they still do this, but when I did it, you could go to the education center and get it reimbursed. I think like one time.
Yeah.
So
it's also not strict as well. We can get into that test taking portion of it.
Yeah, the proctoring, which is annoying. And so the GMAT is going to have. If you ask me like the actual format of it, I don't remember. But let's take a look. So the GMAT has 4 sections: the analytical writing assessment, nobody gives a shit about; integrated reasoning, nobody gives a shit about. I mean, I literally look. Unless somebody has a different experience, nobody cares about these. The GMAT prep program I took straight up said you could just click through these things, and I did. So maybe the schools are actually starting to use them now, but essentially they're meaningless. Um, and then you have the quantitative reasoning, and so let's see how. Yeah, so this it would just go straight, right? So you would have 62 minutes to answer 31 questions, and it's not tough math. It requires reasoning, and it requires you to understand it. And so these tests try to basically bracket you. And so they'll hit you with, say, like a 700 level question as like your first question. Or it could be like a 650 one, right? And you just crush it like right away. You're like, boom. And so then the test is going to go, okay, let's give this guy something that's maybe a little harder or a little easier and see what he does. And you're like, oh, if he crushes one that's easier, he's like, okay, well, clearly that the first one like wasn't a fluke. And it'll basically like up its level of difficulty, right? Against you. Because the test makers know they have a lot of data, right? That a specific kind of question will be answered correctly by a certain percentage of people, right? There'll be like a distribution that they can build data or build it off, right? And so they know that this is like a 700 level question, and so they'll keep throwing this stuff at you to kind of see where you're at and try to hold you there. And when they try and hold you there, um, you'll eventually find if you're like if you're like really crushing the questions in like at a 700 level, you'll find that you'll be getting some of them wrong for sure, right? But the fact that you've already kind of proven that you can answer a certain number of questions at that level means the test will just start throwing harder stuff at you. And some people won't even finish it. Like they won't even finish like all the questions either. Like I've had friends who are like, I only got to like 25, and they'd still get like a 700 because like the test to say, hey, clearly this person based off their, how the difficulty of questions they're answering, even if they got some wrong, is clearly this person is at a 700 level, and the test is interesting like that. So it's as far as like test taking strategy, like how would you think that changes how you would approach it, Austin?
I think you're spot on. I mean, it's a learning test, and the big thing is real time while you're there. Don't think about that. Don't be like, oh shit, this question might be easier than the previous one, so maybe I missed it. And then you start getting in this like do loop in your head about you're not taking the test anymore. You're thinking about the process of taking the test. And so when you're in it, just crush each question, knowing that you are going to have questions that are difficult. And it doesn't mean that you're like, you don't know if that's a 700 or 600 level question. Like you're just going to be thrown stuff that's because the test is finding out where you are. And so it's going to find questions that you're good at and find questions that you're not good at.
Yeah, like a guy who got like a 790, right? So like what is it, GMAT from like 200 to 800, and
Yeah.
like the average score is like in the like low 500s or maybe 400s or something. But like what the test can the people who got like a 790 on the score, which is like basically a perfect score, probably got a bunch of questions wrong.
Oh, totally.
But they were just able to answer really tough ones, right? And the test takes that into consideration. Um, it's interesting, right? Some people are better at quantitative. Some people are better at verbal. Generally schools are going to be more concerned about your quantitative, right? And it's just more that you can like how can you like read like stupid business stuff.
Yep.
And but that being said, some people will be better at verbal than they are quantitative. I think generally the verbal is considered easier. Like if you think about like a particular level of hell, the data sufficiency problems in the GMAT are
Awful.
I mean, it can be like this like insane mind teaser of that you just know how to have to do the problem. Um, so yeah, it's interesting score for sure, interesting test for sure. Yeah, he says it's computer adaptive. What does it mean? You just have to know how to do a lot of little math and recognize the kind of templates that they overlay for these questions, right? And it's interesting if you so like when I took this GMAT course right here, this is a plug for this place, right? They would only teach from the official GMAT books or GMAC books. And the reasoning, the guy who he's like an MIT MBA, and I think he also had like a PhD, is he was like, look, the reason we do this is because the test makers only have so many different ways to construct these questions. And if they have to retire questions, they have to take them out of service essentially, right? And come up with new ones. Well, they can only come up with like so many different like permutations of the new ones, right? So you'll see like questions from like old books essentially if you look between like the 2019 2018 back and back, and you'll see permutations of basically the same question with different like values and maybe worded slightly differently, but essentially like the like template, right, of like how you would attack this question is the same. And so that is the real power if you can begin to pick up on those kind of templates, and you learn how the questions are worded right, and that will help you greatly prepare for this test, right? Along with having to memorize all the stupid little math tricks. Like, what do you think, Strobes?
Yeah, I mean the official study guide is what I used, and it was awesome. And it comes with 2 free tests.
Yeah.
And the 2 tests were pretty accurate in terms of where they're going to get your score. Mine tracked right along with what I got eventually on the test. So
yeah,
I think each guide has 100 something questions, and you can buy them all, and then I just plowed through them, every single one.
Yeah, I think sometimes the toughest part, right, is if you're kind of rusty on some math concepts that those sometimes require a little more teaching. So this is a dude he's like Dr. Amar here, right? And he holds an MBA from MIT and a PhD from Berkeley. And just seeing how this dude would attack this. He's electric.
I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, you're not? Okay, yeah. That sucks. But like, I'm laughing because I'm listening to his voice, and he's just fucking electric. He's a great dude. So he's like going over like a data sufficiency question here, and these questions are just derived straight from hell. It's like if the devil was thinking of how to like torture you.
There's also a lot of free resources as well.
Yeah,
I didn't have time to do a course because I was on a pretty compressed timeline for my application, and there are a lot of free open resources on
there are
videos. So
yeah, Khan Academy is one. So like let's look at Khan Academy, like GMAT, boom, math. Or at least it was supposed to open something. So like this is a great free resource. What were the other ones you used, or did you just use the books?
YouTube. I bought the official study guide, and then I went on YouTube, and that was it.
Yeah, and so if you're comfortable doing it that way, like as a dirt cheap way to get ready for the GMAT, because some of these GMAT courses are super expensive, like $3,000 or something.
And when you register for it, you can actually, that's right when I registered it is when it said, hey, buy our official prep book. And so I just bought the prep book right when I registered.
Yeah. So it's yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot out there, and I think everybody kind of maybe runs to Kaplan as like the default thing, but there's honestly better review, ones out here. So how long did you take to prepare for it?
2 weeks.
Damn, bro, you're fucking smart.
I am not I would not replicate what I did. I was on a compressed timeline, so I decided in August I was going to apply, and obviously round 1 was out of the question. So I settled on round 2, which gave me a test date in September. So mid-September was when I took my test. And so I registered mid-August, bought the books. And when the books got there, I had a little over 2 weeks, I think 2.5. And that was my prep. So I just did every single question in that entire book, and then watched videos online. And I devoted a pretty significant chunk of that 2 weeks to studying.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of guys. I knew a guy who went to HBS, right? And he did the Goldman Sachs thing with me, and I think he works at JP Morgan, their M&A group now. He was an infantry dude, super smart guy. Dude, he studied this thing for like fucking a year, like straight like a year. Like, can you imagine that?
That's too much.
Like people will do that. People will fucking study for this thing for like a year, and he got like a 710, and he's like, no, I need higher to get an HBS, and he kept studying until he got like a 750 or something. So it just I think it's a great example because it just depends. It just depends on like who it is, and some people are going to crush it. You know, like you flew fighter jets in the Navy. That's probably pretty hard to get out of flight school, right?
Yeah.
You know, and you just picked it up, right? It took me longer. I think I studied like 3 months for it.
Actually hopped into a jet right after taking my GMAT. So I took the GMAT.
Did you
I took
take
it
it
on
on
base.
base? Damn.
Yeah. And then that afternoon I hopped in the jet and did a low level.
Did you you put that in the admissions essay? You're like, right after I crushed this fucking pussy ass test, I then flew a fighter jet.
No, I didn't. But I did interview while I was deployed, so I got that.
It's like you think I'm scared of your stupid math course. Dude, that's a great story. You should, if you're not using that in interviews, man, you're really missing out on some low hanging fruit there, because that is because for anybody who's gone through this fucking process of going to business school, they would think that is so cool, right? So use what you got.
Yeah. It was a good way to celebrate, since you do find out the score the moment you finish the test.
You do, and I actually think that's a great segue, right? So you have like the option, right? So like once you finish it and displays your score, and you like either like hate yourself or you or don't, you have the option to like put it, or maybe you put in the schools at the beginning, like they make you put in the schools at the beginning, and you decide like, hey, yeah, the schools you're going to send them to, right? Because remember, this is a fucking business, right? And these guys, you're paying them for this test to have this painful experience. And so they'll like, hey, you need to send it like 5 schools for free or something. But then afterwards, if you want to send to any more schools, you got to pay money, like $25 to send it to a school. It's such a fucking hustle. I mean, I don't know what the margins are in this thing, but it's like outrageous. And and so then you have the option like, okay, well, do you want to send the score to the school, or do you want to cancel it, right? And basically the option they're giving you is, hey, do you want the school to see this score or not? And some people will tell you like, oh, I canceled it. And I actually am not a fan of that. I think what you need to do, something that schools do value, is grit. And they like to see some persistence, right? And so say you take the GMAT and you get like a 650, and you take it again, you're like, I'm gonna get a 700 this time, you get like a 680. And you're like, okay, one more time, and you take it like again, you get like a 660 or something, right? A school, you shouldn't cancel any of those scores, especially obviously the highest one. You should send those scores to the school, because the school's going to see that, and they're going to be like, you know what, this person is displaying persistence and grit. Those are valued attributes, right? The test can be tough. Not everybody tests well. You know, they would value that, at least in my opinion. Like, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, everything I tell people when they're applying, like, you only get a couple ways to communicate to the admissions committee. You have the GMAT, you have your resume, you have the like couple paragraphs in the actual application, and then you have your essays. Like you have to select among all those communication methods, like, what am I trying to tell them? And so be very strategic about your application, and hiding bad scores, like you said, is not going to tell them anything, but showing the fact that you've done it multiple times tells them something.
And you know, and the reason these schools want people who are persistent is business school. I want to talk about business school. Business school is a great time. It's fun. It is, however, not easy in the way you think it's going to be. It is easy from the sense that you have a lot of control over your time and your life. It's not easy in the sense that you are going to get rejected by a lot of companies when you recruit, and you are going to have to be very persistent in how you pursue networking and employment opportunities and balance your time and everything at school. And so it requires people who are not going to give up. You're going to meet some extremely motivated people at these programs. It is crazy. I mean, and I make fun of Army officers, you know, for being a bunch of tryhards. And I do it in good jest, but like seriously, there is some truth to it. Like being a military officer is difficult, but some of these people you meet in these programs are just like on another level. Like they're just like so motivated and so talented. I mean, it's like insane. You'd be like, oh, you like started like a business, or you like worked in like the super high prayer. You worked like 128 fucking hours a week or something at like an investment bank. You're like $1 billion deals. And you're just like so smart. You just understand stuff. So you understand like how the world works from a business standpoint at such a young age, right? It's really impressive. Uh, and you went to a more impressive school than I did, so yeah, I'm sure you probably share the same sentiments.
You're spot on. Like every single person there has imposter syndrome and is thinks they're like underwhelming. But I remember the vets. We had, the first day you'd see another dude with, you know, who actually looks like he goes to the gym, and you're like, he looks older, and you're like, hey, you have that? Like, yeah. Pretty soon, like I remember distinctly, we had this like congregation of like 4 or 5, actually like 5 or 6 people that would walk by and be like, you guys vets? And then they'd join in. And every one of us on that conversation was like, dude, some of these people here are insane. Like, I was sitting next to a dude who founded a company at age 18 and sold it at 22 for like an insane amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
you're like, how? They're like,
different.
dude, you flew jets, and you're like, that's no, that was an easy, like,
You could
no,
teach
like
you could teach most people to do that.
yeah, you could teach someone to do that. Like,
Yeah,
you founded a company, and like
that's
some of
really
these
hard.
people are
Yeah,
just doing insane stuff, you know.
yeah. I tell people, right? People ask me about flight school. I'm like, what's really great about the Army, and I'm sure the Navy is this, is if you took a random person, right, and as long as you could like screen at some level that they had the like if you could have them take like the AFAST or the whatever the flight skills test is, and if they didn't even know what the flight skills test was, and you could just like look at the score, okay, this person has the aptitude to be a pilot, and you showed them up to flight school and they'd never seen an aircraft, they didn't even like know aircraft existed, by the end of it they would be able to fly a helicopter,
Yeah,
at a rudimentary level, because it is something that can be taught. Now it's not too it is something that you have to like learn how to do, and it is very dangerous, but some of the stuff that you'll see people at business school who've done, I mean, they've created things out of nothing, or they've just operated in like insanely high pressure environments.
but I mean, it goes to like the larger point of you and I were joking, a couple months ago, like being and looking back on it, being a military officer was such an easy job because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much handholding, right? Like flight school is all handholding. There is a syllabus, and every stage in that syllabus, there is a list of things you're required to do, and there's resources to figure out how to do that. And you're presented all the tools you need to succeed.
Yeah.
And it's just not that way on the outside. And getting on the outside and seeing that, and then looking back and going, wow, none of my classmates have this kind of hand-holding experience that we have. I never had to worry about healthcare
Yeah.
or finding a job. I just, as my tour of duty went up, I emailed some dude and he told me, here's all the jobs you can pick from. And you picked a job. Like, that doesn't exist
No, it
on
doesn't.
the
People
outside.
people have to really create their own luck, and they have to be good, and they have to be good in ways. In the military, the whole network. You just brought it up. Like, hey, I called up my branch manager and gave me a list of assignments. In the civilian world, that is called networking,
Yeah.
and trying to find where there is opportunity and intersection, right, with a job and your skills, and it requires a lot of interpersonal and emotional intelligence to network,
Yeah.
because networking comes off as slimy, but really what it's about are two people trying to see if there's a congruent interest for them to do work together and make money.
It's only
Uh,
slimy if it's disingenuous.
yeah, like I'll talk with people all the time. It's almost like dating, like in a
Yeah.
weird way. It's almost like we're gonna like flirt, and if we see there's like something that can be done, but but it's also not like dating in the sense that me talking with another dude for an hour it's gonna be more about our interests, right? And
Yeah.
if there's a way for us to work.
And it's not always what you see in the movies, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone transitioning who's reaching out to you or me, or they're doing networking without realizing it. Like for the vets who've reached out to me, I'm like, hey man, I'm happy to help you out. And, maybe 10 years down the road, on LinkedIn, I'll search for someone at a company and see that this one person was there and reach out to her and go, hey, you reached out to me to help a couple years ago. How are things going? I have a question about your company. And like, that's networking. It's just taking care of other people and just being a nice person.
I actually think when I took a Tepper, I'm sure HBS has the same thing. They had a class where they talked about kind of like how like human networks worked, and the woman who taught it, the PhD, she said that, and she was explaining some research, and it was like most job like offers or connections don't actually come through like your first like your first like set of like connections, right? If you think about yourself as a node and you're connected to a bunch of people, it actually comes from like the second and third order ones, right? It's either like, hey, I know somebody that I've done stuff with in the past, right? And so the idea behind that is there's not as much emotion, right? But you've done work together, so there might be like there's the ability to work transactionally together easily. Or it's somebody like, hey, let me introduce you to a friend, right? But it really, from like the people who are like closest to you, it's not so much. Interesting stuff for sure. So maybe switching gears for a second. One of the we talked about like the GRE, right? We touched on this earlier. All these schools take the GRE now. It's not a big deal, but I think it is important that you do at least maybe know where your GRE falls, right? So I'll get people who will ask me, hey, if my GRE is good, right? And what the first thing I will do is I will go to the the official GRE to GMAT or GMAT to GRE to GMAT conversion score, right? And so let's take a look at like the Harvard one. So the median verbal and quantitative is 163. So what does that come out to? GMAT 690, much lower than the than what I'm sure what did it say, like 620 to 790, right? But what's important to note about here, right, is the GRE. They're also looking at the percentiles, right, and like what percentile you're in for the GRE, because to them that's actually more indicative of, hey, how well did this person do? And I believe for the GRE, it's somehow done a little differently with the percentiles, because it's like so many people take it, whereas a much smaller subset of people take the GMAT. So like if you like what's missing here, right, is this says 690, right? And we said, hey, you got to get a 700, but like what is like 163 fall in the percentile range of the GRE? It might be in like the top 10%, because like all these graduate programs take the GRE, and you'll have people all the way from guys who are going to go do like a math major or math masters, in at MIT, to somebody who wants to go do like study like geology or something. And so those people who are going to go do these super, like they're going to score like damn near perfect scores. And everybody, and so what I'm saying is right, is the schools understand that. And so when you hear that the GRE is easier, like I don't know, if you're not having much luck with the GMAT, I guess you could try the GRE. Hey, better to try options, right? Yeah.
Pick one and stick with it, though. Don't take them both.
Yeah, it can get,
they're very different tests.
They are different tests. The GRE's math is actually more difficult, and it's because they let you have a calculator, and the format of the tests are different as well. But the GREs, they still only care about the verbal and quantitative. All the other like scientific reasoning or whatever the fuck it is, they don't care. And so the last thing we can talk about is the well, actually, we'll talk about two things. We were talking about the proctoring, right? So when you go to take these tests, right, you sign up and you go to some like test center, and you got to have like 3 forms of ID, maybe it's like 2, and they basically like make you put all your shit in like a locker, and then you gotta like, and I know for the GMAT you had to like, they had to you to give them like a fingerprint, right? Because like people have like cheated on this thing in all different ways, especially I think some of the international students or international people take the GMAT, not the students. And like you go in, you like sit at this little computer screen. They give you like this scratch sheet and some like pencils. And you have like water, and you just have this kind of like computer that you sit in front of and take the test. And it sucks, and it takes forever to take, and they've got like all these cameras on you. It's really not a fun experience. But you
Unless you're
took
on
your
base.
yeah,
I took
unless you're on base, yeah.
which I was in a building. There was none of that. No proctor at all. It was me and only me in the test room. The door was open because the air conditioning didn't work. So they needed a breeze to come through the room. And it looked, the door was open to an aircraft carrier that was getting like maintenance done on it. So you just heard like hammering and like trucks backing up the entire time. It was such a shit experience.
Yeah, but interestingly, like no, like even if you didn't have a proctor to supervise you, like it wouldn't help you on the test because
No.
because the test moves so quick, right? That like
Yeah.
you don't have time to fuck around on these questions. Like you either like see the pattern that needs to be, yeah, you have to like really, you can only really spend like a minute and a half, minute and 45 of these questions, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no like amount of Googling or fucking around in your calculator that's going to help you.
No. I mean, I was sitting there like, man, if I wanted to cheat, I could cheat, but I wouldn't know how to because it's
Yeah.
just not a test that you can sit there and plug around on your phone with.
No, it's not. It's not like, oh, if I divide, like no, like the math is not the impediment. It's certainly something you can fuck up, but the math isn't what is stopping you. It is like
Clock.
literally the clock and trying to understand what the hell the fucking the question is asking for, which
Yeah.
can be a bit of a challenge. Um, okay, so let's talk about the executive assessment here. So this is relatively new, and I actually think it's a welcome change from the GMAT. And so I actually didn't know about this, right? Until I actually had some followers like DMing me, be like, hey, what do you know about the executive assessment? I was like, what the fuck is that?
I've never heard about this.
Yeah, so the business schools recognized from the research I've done on this, business schools recognized like, hey, much like they expanded to take the GRE, they said, you know, we are also kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here by making people who've been working out in the business world for like 7 or 10 years taking the GMAT, you know, like maybe fighter pilots, for example. Not like these Black Hawk people like me whose our ADSO was like non-existent. But it's still longer than most. But so this is actually a test you can take, and from what I've heard, it's like actually simpler, it's easier. It doesn't require as much preparation to take, and I think a lot of people should take a look at it because it says executive assessment, and so the implied thing is like for executive MBAs, but apparently a lot of normal MBA programs just take this as well. And people were like, oh, I got into Wharton with the executive assessment, like yada yada yada. So definitely something you should take into consideration. I think there's only a certain number of times you can take this test, though, which is, I think, maybe the limiting factor. Let's see. I don't know. I'd have to really see, or I could just Google it. I don't want to do that. How many times can I take the executive assessment? 2 times. You can only take it 2 times. Yeah, so it's supposedly easier. And I think you can see who takes the executive assessment. Accepting schools here. Yeah, so it shows like, hey, like here's all the different MBA programs that take it. Like Berkeley, see, what is it? Like fucking Carnegie Mellon, full-time MBA. Berkeley Haas, the evening and weekend MBA, which is different than an MBA for executives. This is still like a real MBA. Chicago, yeah, so they're even. their evening and weekend. Yeah. So you can start to see who this test is kind of aimed at, right? It's aimed for somebody that doesn't have that wants to go to business school, but maybe doesn't want to put up with all the bullshit, the GMAT. Now there are some costs to doing like weekend and evening MBAs though. I don't know how the scholarship situation is, but normally full-time MBAs are where most of the scholarship money is going to be.
But Columbia lets you do it for full time.
Yeah, I mean, fucking daytime MBA, man. For Duke, I mean, Duke's a really good school. Fordham, I mean, you got a lot of Georgetown, full-time MBA. I know vets love Georgetown. They're fucking all about it. What is this McDonough School? Oh, and the Walsh School Foreign Service. Oh, this is cool. Masters of Arts in International Business and Policy. I wonder how that actually places people. One in business school.
That's worth a whole nother. We could do a whole nother episode on that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So like the point is, right, is you should like check this and see like where these kind of like fall into your goals. I mean, look at this shit ton of business schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vanderbilt, full-time. Vanderbilt's a great school. UVA. Oh yeah, Darden, full-time. Yale. Yeah, this is where it's at. Actually, I don't see it. Is Wharton on here?
There it is.
Yeah, their executive program. Yeah, cool. You know, so it's something to consider, right? But you still prepare for the test. Don't just wing it. Winging it never goes well. Okay. Well, anything you want to talk about else, Strobes? Or I think we kind of.
Nothing. I mean, we covered what it is, preparation, how to take it, you know, the impact on the overall application, you know.
Yeah. Let's see. And yeah, if you ever wanted to kind of see like this, like this is all MBA class profiles, for example, right? And this, you know, you can easily find like all this information.
Quotes and Quants is a real great resource.
It is. Imagine like if Sitreps to Steercos was 1,000 times more useful and professional, and actually generated real revenue instead of the beer money that it generates. And you would have Podes Quants.
Bush Light money or nice beer?
Depends. I actually sent in my first invoice today to somebody.
Really?
Pretty cool. Yeah, it's like I'm stroking invoices. It's generated enough money that it's it incentivizes me to keep doing it. Yeah, so yeah, definitely. Actually, before we go, I want to see what is the profile for Stanford entering class profile. Don't hide it from me. Just give it to me, Stanford. 3.8 average GPA. It's pretty high. It's like I love how the thing slides. It's like 4.7 years seems about right. Test scores.
What's your military? Sure. Military.
Only 4%. Yeah, Stanford is kind of picky in who they take.
Yeah.
For sure.
Their class size is also like 450, whereas Harvard's is 900 to 1,000.
Yeah, but look at for Stanford, investment management, PE, VC.
Yeah.
Especially for someone coming from an undergrad role.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive. Yeah, and look at this, like 600 to 790. Yeah, you see, this is like a great example. Like if you really want to get into Stanford, this is probably where you need to be. Cool. All right. So that's it. So we'll go ahead and sign off. I think we're going to try and do this as a new format because these videos take time to make and produce, and planning is in short supply for people who are busy like us. So
yeah,
it's you know, I'm trying to keep producing stuff that is value add, and you know, maybe we'll talk about the admission. We'll just talk about like MBA stuff, right? I'll put up on YouTube. It'll be great. So hey, appreciate everybody listening, and we'll talk soon.